Hi everyone! I have grown many dwarf tomato varieties this season, and as promised earlier, I begin my story about them. Dwarf tomatoes are a beautiful and fairly new direction of breeding, which is rapidly gaining popularity around the world. It will not be easy to tell about all of them at once, so today I will show you the first 5 of those I grew this season and which I liked. Almost all my dwarfs were grown outside and were doing well, but in July I had the unpleasant surprise of a pea-sized hail, which managed to damage the leaves and of course stress the plants, but even so, these fighters were able to overcome the vagaries of weather and give me a crop of tomatoes which I have not collected outside before, growing the usual determinate varieties. And I'm left to guess how much more of a crop I could have had if not for the hail. Either way, these beautiful plants deserve to be grown and talked about. Well, let's get started. And the first variety I want to talk about in this video is the Aussie Drop tomato by Patrina Noski Small from Australia. The small brown fruits are gathered into compact bunches. Powerful plants with a regular wrinkled leaf have reached a height of 3.5 feet or 1.2 meters. This variety is the result of crossing kangaroo paw brown in the F4 stage with a purple Russian indeterminate tomato. As for the name, Aussie Drop, I did not guess and just asked Patrina herself to tell you the story of its origin.
Hi everyone, Patrina here from the Dwarf Tomato Project. Here is the story of Aussie Drop. I often used to give family or friends some seedlings to grow because in the early times of this project I had very little garden space to grow them all myself. I volunteered one day each week at a theatre and gave a lady called Margaret Cronin one of these seedlings to grow, and she liked the tomatoes from this plant very much. So I told her that she could name this as a new dwarf variety. You sometimes hear an unusual expression in Australia about a drop of wine. Someone lifts up a bottle of wine and asks if anyone wants a drop. So we talked about it as we raised our glasses to call this variety Aussie Drop.
Such is the amazing story of the Aussie Drop tomato. As for the weight of the fruit, it exceeded 100 grams or 3.5 ounces and sometimes approached 150 grams or 5 ounces, which is quite good for such dense tomatoes. Inside, I found the flash of an incredibly beautiful color of a good beet, very rich, with few seeds. The taste is really sweet, with no noticeable acidity, spicy tomato flavor. Speaking in general, I liked this variety for its 3 main qualities: dense fruits, which are good for storing, color, and of course the taste. From the dark tomato, let's move on to a bright, sunny variety called Dwarf Blazing Beauty, a variety that I grew primarily for the purpose of slicing it into a salad. 2 people were involved in the creation of this beauty. Patrina made a cross and Craig Laholia of North Carolina stabilized the variety and gave it a name, which, by the way, fully corresponds to the appearance of the fruits. They are indeed very bright, shiny, yellow-orange in color. Potato leaf plants, which in the case of dwarf tomatoes, are even more pretty than that of the indeterminate varieties. The fruits have thin skin and look very attractive. And believe me, their main beauty, that the name says, is hidden inside. Despite the vagaries of the weather and such unexpected hail, the weight of the fruits exceeded 200 grams or 7 ounces. Cutting these tomatoes was a real pleasure. Just a flawless yellow-orange color, without any veins or hollows. They seem to glow from within, and the smell is just floating in the air. Sweetness dominates the flavor. Acidity is barely noticeable. It is very good. I have had an absolutely positive experience with this strain, so I can only join the many delightful reviews of Dwarf Blazing Beauty. If you want to grow a yellow dwarf tomato, this one is just perfect. I have long wondered if I should grow varieties that are not directly related to the dwarf tomato project, but after some time I decided to give these varieties a chance, because in any case they are also dwarf tomatoes. The first variety I want to highlight is called Purple Reign tomato, bred by Dean Slater, the creator of such masterpieces as Damascus Steel and Wolverine. Purple Reign is a typical dwarf tomato, sturdy and strong plant about 1 meter or 3 feet tall, created as a cross of Big Chief and a line of Gandalf. The fruits are medium-sized, pink-purple in color, and there are quite a lot of them. The first tomatoes weighed from 140 to 180 grams or from 5 to 6 ounces, but later they were larger. On the cut, tomatoes are pretty, gently pink, with greenish tints in the seed cavities, and to my surprise, they were quite dense, although it is a variety for salads. Again, I did not know what to expect from the taste, but it was juicy and enjoyable, somewhat reminiscent of the taste of wild Fred tomato. There is both sweetness and pleasant acidity, so fans of similar tomatoes will definitely appreciate its taste. Rich tomato flavor, which is exactly what I want to feel in a beefsteak variety. The next dwarf tomato has the exceptionally beautiful name Firebird Sweet. And it is beautiful not only in its name, but of course the appearance of the fruit. Bright, crimson-colored tomatoes with noticeable orange stripes. Not the shortest dwarf to reach a height of 4 feet or 1.2 meters. The tomatoes are ribbed and quite pretty. Firebird Sweet originated from a cross made by Vince Lavallo between dwarf Wild Fred and Beauty King tomatoes, and was later stabilized by Craig LaHollier, who gave it that name. The first tomatoes harvested were around the same size and weighed about 140 grams or 5 ounces. The inside of the fruit is a rich, smooth color, red-pink, dense with few seeds. The taste is sweet and pleasant, and the skin is so thin that when I ate these tomatoes, it was almost not felt. So it is absolutely a godsend variety for a salad, and of course for decorating the garden. Dwarf, which stands out from the others with its unusual coloring. And in general, I liked Dwarf Firebird Sweet. Another dwarf tomato variety to look out for is Amy's Ohio. One more dwarf tomato variety originated from a cross made by Patrina Noski-Small of Summertime Gold and Sleeping Lady tomatoes, and selected and named by Susan Oliverson. The plants are literally strewn with small green fruits, which at full ripeness take on a golden tone and even some copper tones, making them very similar to, for example, Grubb's Mystery Green tomatoes. I grew them in 3 or 4 stems, and they reached a height of a little over 3 feet or 1 meter. I consider myself a fan of green-fruited tomatoes, and it is for this reason that Dwarf Amy's Ohio made a great impression on me. On average, the fruits weighed about 100 grams or 3.5 ounces, which is not too little, especially considering the number of tomatoes. Therefore, I can rate the yield of Amy's Ohio as a very decent. The flesh is typical for green tomatoes, yellow-green color. The tomatoes are very juicy, with a thin skin. But despite this, the fruits are not cracked even grown outside. The taste is good, sweet, without noticeable acidity. The longer the fruit ripens, the more delicious they become. In addition, Amy's Ohio is considered one of the most productive dwarf tomatoes, which of course adds points to its score. These were the first 5 dwarf tomato varieties that I have told you about today, and soon I will continue to tell you about the other varieties of dwarf tomatoes as well as the indeterminate ones. If you haven't grown dwarf tomatoes yet, I highly recommend you do so and appreciate their yield potential, because as the Australian saying goes, in the planting season, visitors come singly, and in harvest time, they come in crowds. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and of course, love tomatoes, grow tomatoes. This is the Lucky Garden channel, and see you soon.